All right, good afternoon, everybody. I will call the meeting to order for the Environment Committee, July 27th, 2021. So let's do a roll call, see who's all here.
Sounds great. Thank you. Fredson,
Here.
Sterner,
Here.
Vento,
Here.
Wolf,
Here.
Zarin, and Lindstrom.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next up is the reading of the chair's statement, which we do before every meeting. The Metropolitan Council Chair has determined it is not practical or prudent to conduct in-person meetings in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Accordingly, committee members will participate in this meeting via telephone or other electronic means, and the meeting will be conducted under Minnesota statutes, section 13D021, at the date and time stated above, which is right now. If you have any comments, we encourage members of the public to email us at public.info@metc.state.mn.us, and we will respond in a timely manner. With that out of the way, and if there's no changes to today's agenda, we'll get started with the approval of the minutes from July 13th, 2021. Is there a motion and a second to approve those minutes?
Chair, this is Sterner. I'd make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. In a second.
Seconds.
Excellent. Roll call, please.
Fredson,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zarin,
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
And that takes us to the one and only item on our consent agenda, which is the City of Lexington's comp plan and comprehensive sewer plan. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Wolf moves approval.
In a second.
Vento seconds.
Thank you. Roll call.
Fredson.
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye. Aye.
thank you. Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zarin,
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And a few excellent items on our non-consent business agenda today, starting with a budget amendment. And I believe Mr. Smith and Ms. Clancy will take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. My name is Janine Clancy, and I'm the Assistant General Manager for Wastewater Planning and Capital Project Delivery. And my colleague Ned Smith and I are here this evening to present business item 2021-143JT, 2021 Unified Budget Amendment, second quarter. This budget amendment covers items in both the ES capital program and the operating budget. I will present the requested revision to the authorized capital program, which we often call the ACP, and then I will turn it over to Ned to walk through the operating budget and to close out our presentation. Next slide. And Jason, you can actually advance to slide 3, please. Thank you. The proposed amendment reallocates funding between programs. ES staff is requesting that the council authorize a reduction in funding for program 8086 North Area Interceptor Rehabilitation by $15 million and increase authorization for funding in program 8090 Interceptor Rehabilitation by $15 million. And the rationale for this is that recent engineering estimates for the rehabilitation of interceptors in program 8086, the North Area Interceptor Rehabilitation Program, including projects in Maple Grove and Coon Rapids, are much less than the capital project funding earmarked for the program. Meanwhile, ongoing condition assessments have revealed additional needs in the interceptor system to address asset preservation, quality improvements, or to address capacity expansion. The Maple Grove project has adequate funding, even with the reduction, to proceed, and the council will be seeing that project in the next several months. The Coon Rapids project will not be constructed until the 2024 through 2026 timeframe. And as a result, we are prioritizing needs within Program 8090, where the condition assessment shows more critical needs. And those projects are located in Maplewood, Burnsville, Shakopee, and at the Bloomington Siphon Outlet Structure. Next slide. ES is also requesting that we transfer $6 million from Program 8093, Brooklyn Park Champlain Interceptor Renewal, which is known as BPCI Renewal Phases 3 through 5. And we're asking that we transfer this to Program 8082, St. Bonifacius Lift Station and Force Main for the renovation of L24 and Force Main 7020 replacement. So many of the council members know that we are finishing up a large project in Brooklyn Park, just upstream of L32. Phases 3 through 5 are located north of this current project and will be constructed in 2024 through 2026. Rated condition 4 pipe, this work is critical, but it is necessary to ask for this amendment to address a higher priority project, which is ready to be bid this fall, located in the St. Bonifacius and Minnetrista area. The L24 project and Force Main 7020 project will address issues identified through a condition assessment of the lift station, including safety issues, capacity issues, and performance of the system. The project also includes replacement of a 40-year-old force main. This new force main will provide reliability improvements as well as capacity for long-term growth. We are increasing this project budget to address our current engineering estimate, which includes anticipated costs associated with a nationwide shortage of polymers and resins that were impacted by all of the storms that impacted Texas this past year. And these polymers and resins are used to fabricate maintenance structures, and we're seeing an increase in cost in those right now. So those two items, the proposed amendment does not change the total 2021 budget for the ACP or the authorized capital program or the anticipated environmental services current year capital expenditures. And furthermore, this action does not change the overall 6-year capital program, which is at $1,032,670,524. Ned?
Thank you, Janine. Next slide, please. As Janine mentioned, I am the Director of Finance and Pretreatment, and I'm here to walk through our operating budget changes. The first one is to return some stormwater grants in order to fund our water supply planning. So over the last 5 years, we've had about a little over $4 million in stormwater levy grants from the Regional Administration General Fund. And about 668,000 of those have come back from some of the awardees. Some of them because they came in drastically under budget or they reduced their scope, and some of them where they just couldn't do the work and couldn't find their portion of the funding. There's a complete list of what those projects are included in the business item. And what we'd like to do is take that money and apply it towards water supply planning. Each year, water supply planning needs about $250,000 a year to support water supply planning activities in the region. We only get $100,000 of that from the general fund, and the other $150,000 is left to us to figure out how to fund. We are statutorily prohibited from using wastewater fees to fund this. So for the past several years, we've been using a special bond that was issued in the mid-aughts, around 2006, 2007, that was dedicated to water supply planning. And we have slowly chipped away at that, and we are anticipating that it will run out in 2022. In addition, we have a little bit of extra requirements on the water supply planning team in the coming years. particularly around helping with the Water Resources Policy Plan, as well as Thrive 2050 and ongoing MOSAC and TAC support. MOSAC being the Metropolitan Area Water Supply Advisory Committee, TAC being the Technical Advisory Committee. And these have been funded by legislature in the past, around 2015 or 2016, but the legislature opted not to fund that work, even though it is still required most recently. So we need to come up with a stopgap to help us get through the next couple of years. So we are proposing that we reallocate that $668,000 to fund water supply planning activities through 2024. Just a little bit of the mechanics behind that. We're actually going to return that to the general fund, and then we will ask that that money be set aside and specifically designated for water supply planning activities. While that's happening, our government affairs group will be working with both sides of the aisle, as well as the governor's office, to get those appropriations from the legislature. The thought there is it's not very much. It's about $100,000 to $150,000 a year going forward, and we should be able to achieve that. Next slide, please. In addition, we have an increase in our budget for our RA salary allocations, RA regional administration. So these are the support services that we receive, centralized services from regional administration. This is around HR, information services, finance, accounting, treasury, legal, risk, communications, all of the central groups. A portion of their salaries are allocated out to ES each year. When they built their budget in 2021, they, due to the COVID uncertainty, actually planned for a 0% salary increase. However, we've seen that the economic impacts of COVID have been not to the extent that was anticipated. And so our regional administration feels comfortable in issuing a 2021 pay raise for its employees. That money then will get allocated out to us, and we will fund that through our operating reserve. Just as a side note, this doesn't apply to our overall salaries because we built our ES salaries kind of before COVID hit. We actually build our salary plan around January and February of a year. So we had planned on a raise. And so we don't need to make any adjustments, thank goodness, for ES because it's already baked into our 2021 budget, but is not baked into our for the regional administration allocation. Next slide, please. So with that, the proposed actions is that the Metropolitan Council amends the 2021 Unified Budget Authorized Capital Program with a reallocation of $21 million as indicated and in accordance with the Unified Capital Program Environmental Services Table 10 and the Capital Program Table, which is Attachment 3. Second, that Environmental Services return $668,000 of unused stormwater grant funds to the Metropolitan Council General Fund as outlined in Table B1, and that the Metropolitan Council replace a restricted use on that $668,000 of return stormwater funds, grant funds, and repurpose to environmental services to help fund projected future shortfalls through 2022 through 2024 in water supply planning operations. And finally, that the Metropolitan Council amends the 2021 Unified Budget Environmental Services Operating Budget to account for unbudgeted pay raises for RA services in 2021, also as reflected in Table B1. And with that, Ms. Clancy and I will stand for any questions.
Any questions?
Wolf moves approval.
And
Bento
is there-
seconds.
There's a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
And just for confirmation, Wolf motioned and Bento seconded? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Fredson?
Aye.
Sterner?
Aye.
Bento?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Zarin?
Aye.
Lindstrom?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And that takes us to our second item, which is the Hopkins system improvements. Mr. Davison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name
Hello.
is Brad Davison. I'm a principal engineer in the Interceptor Engineering Group. Here to present the contract award for East Isles. Move to the next slide, please. Project drivers for this project were general condition of structures, create risk of failure. We have some corrosion from hydrogen sulfide gas in our force main and our access structures. System reliability. This is part of a larger master plan or facility plan for the whole entire Hopkins system. This is the last of 2 segments that are left. And we've got dual force mains from our lift station all the way up to this point, and this will continue the dual force main for system reliability. Access for cleaning and inspection, and improve customer service for cities discharging directly to our force main from city lift stations. You advance to the next slide, please. This is a map of the project area. Construction is primarily contained to the right-of-way of Humboldt Avenue South in Minneapolis. You see Hennepin Avenue is to the east. Off the map to the south is Lagoon, and then the chain of lakes is to the west. Bede-Makaska and Lake of the Isles. You could advance to the next slide, please. Summary of the improvements proposed for this project. Installing dual 24-inch plastic force mains within Humboldt. Replace the vortex drop pipe structure, which is discharges to our deeper tunnel, 1MN 330. And upgrade city storm sewer to reduce risk of flooding at the low point of Humboldt Avenue. This is a city-funded portion through a cooperative agreement. Next slide, please. The communication activities to date, we've done a fairly extensive communication plan. We've had a virtual open house back on August 25th. We've met with the major events of the area, which would be the Uptown Art Fair and Uptown Farmers Market, which use the area that we're proposing to do some of the work. We've coordinated the work with them, and they're on board with our plan. We met with the Minneapolis traffic departments and the Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority for the Midtown Greenway crossings. We've got plans to accommodate for the bike trail path or traffic without having to detour them. We've got an extensive traffic control plan that has been reviewed by the traffic department. We've also updated Councilmember Goodman in Minneapolis in 2 occasions, and we plan to continue updating her fairly regularly. During construction phase, we have a website, hotline, and project email that are all active currently. We got what's called a Gov delivery sign up, where you can periodically sign up to get updates on the project. Any of our stakeholders, the residents, city officials, even council members here at the council can sign up for those updates. I will be attending the East Isles Resident Organization monthly, at least for the first half of the project until we get going full swing. So make sure that the residents are up to date, and I'm available for any questions that they have or any issues that they see from construction. You can advance to the next slide, please. Our schedule. So we're here at the end of July. We're assuming a notice to proceed early September, mid-September, and then construction start first couple weeks in October. We anticipate final restoration to take place in the fall of 2022. Next slide, please. We received 4 bids for this project, ranging from $4,839,294 to a higher range of $6,678,946. The low bid received was from Minger Construction for $4,839,294. Contractor has been, their DBE goal has been reviewed by OEO. They have met their good faith effort on the project. Please advance to the next slide. So the proposed action that the Metropolitan Council authorizes its regional administrator to award and execute a construction contract 20P018 for Hopkins System Improvements East Isles, Contract G, MCS project number 819015 with Meager Construction for the low responsible bid of $4,839,294.00. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation. I'll turn it back to the chair and open it for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Davison? Seeing none, or is that Councilmember Zirin?
Yeah, I got orange fingers. It must be from burritos. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question about the DB goal. We met the good faith effort, or at least the contractor that we want to award did. What did they do to meet the good faith effort? Did they send like 3 emails and nobody responded to the 3 emails and that was good enough? Or did they actually actively go looking for partners on this? Thank you.
Thank you, committee member. Mr. Chair, I received a message from our OEO office that they had passed their good faith effort. I did not get any details on specifically what portions of it they met or anything like that. So I would have to defer to OEO for that answer.
Sometimes we have folks from that office, I'll just throw it out there. Is there anybody else that's dialed in that may know the answer to that question? Or certainly we could get back to you, council member, on that question.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, council members, this is Elaine Ogilvie, supervisor of the small business program. I can answer that question for you if you would like.
Yes, please do so. Thank you.
So Menger Construction, actually the goal on this project was 12%, and Menger Construction committed to meet and exceed that goal.
Great. Does that answer your question, Councilmember Zirin? Or do you have a follow-up?
I do. Then how come it wasn't presented that way? How come it wasn't presented as what the goal was and that they were going to reach that goal?
I believe that we are limited to the amount of information that we can provide in the public business item, just due to it still being an active solicitation until after award. But I do, I think that you have a very good point in that it could have been worded differently in that, you know, the goal was met and or exceeded.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Other questions? Or do we have a motion?
Wolf moves approval.
And a second?
Fredson, I'll second.
All right, I heard Fredson on that one. Roll call, please.
Fredson?
Aye.
Sterner?
Aye.
Bento?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Zirin?
Aye.
And Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that takes us to our next item, which is lift station 46 and 49, improvements and real property acquisition. Mr. Wadeen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. My name is Tim Woodine. I'm Assistant Manager in Interceptor Engineering and Wastewater Planning and Capital Projects Delivery. Here to present to you on business item 2021-203 related to L46 and L49 property acquisition. Next slide, please. A little bit of background on the project itself. Lift stations L46 and L49 are located in Orono, just on the south shore of Crystal Bay on Lake Minnetonka. These facilities have been identified as having condition deficiencies. The mechanical equipment is reaching the end of their the useful life. L46 is planned to be rehabilitated. L49 will be reconstructed. So easement acquisition is necessary to implement the proposed lift station improvements for this project. Our next slide, please. The work will require temporary easement for construction on one parcel near L49. We'll also need site improvements near L46 will require an expansion of an existing permanent easement. Site improvements at L46 will include a driveway that will accommodate maintenance vehicles, reducing the use of on-street parking, which reduces visibility at an intersection with difficult sight lines. That's the main reason for the additional existing permanent easement that we'll need for the area. Our next slide, please. With that, our proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council adopts Resolution 19, authorizing the acquisition and condemnation of real property for the L46 and L49 lift station improvements, MCES project number 802831. Next slide, please. And with that, I can stand for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Woodine? Pretty straightforward. And I think you're up on the next one too, but let's vote on this one. Roll
Move
call, or
approval.
is there a motion first? A motion
Wolf
and a
moves
second?
approval.
And a second?
Bento seconds.
Roll call.
Fredson,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Bento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zarin,
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Mr. Wedine, you'll be chatting with us about the Lake Elmo West connection, real property acquisition and condemnation as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. Again, for the record, my name is Tim Woodine. I am the Assistant Manager for Interceptor Engineering with Wastewater Planning and Capital Project Delivery. Here to present to you on business item 2021-204, Lake Elmo West Connection, Real Property Acquisition and Condemnation. Next slide, please. Our project is located in the city of Lake Elmo, actually a coastal city of Lake Elmo. It's actually located in Oakdale, just north of I-94, between I-694 and Radio Drive. The southwestern portion of Lake Elmo is currently served by a sanitary sewer service, which runs through the city of Oakdale's local trunk system. Our proposed project will include a new 1-mile gravity interceptor, which will be extended to meet the development needs for the city of Lake Elmo. As a part of this project, we'll need easement acquisition to construct the new gravity line and construct the new force main, which will reach the city of Lake Elmo. Our next slide, please. The work will require permanent easement acquisition, as well as some temporary easements for construction. Currently, we estimate that there'll be about 25 parcels that will be impacted along the proposed route. With the approval of this resolution, we will begin to finalize the route and approach the property owners of the affected parcels. Next slide, please. So our proposed action this afternoon is that the Metropolitan Council adopts Resolution 20, authorizing the acquisition and condemnation of real property for the Lake Elmo West Connection, MCES project number 806325. Next slide, please. With that, I'm available for questions.
Questions for Mr. Woodine? Councilmember Bento, is this in your district?
No,
Just a little bit outside, okay.
Yeah. but I'm happy to make the motion.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Wolf seconds.
Could I just ask a quick question before we vote, Mr. Chair?
Please.
If we could go back to the map. And I read through these materials and now I'm not recalling, but Tim, are the 25 parcels residential, commercial, agricultural, undeveloped, or a combination?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Vento. The parcels are a combination. There are some residential parcels in the area. There are some commercial properties in the area. A lot of what's on the north side of I-94 is undeveloped area, or the back sides of existing lots.
Thank you.
Great question. Other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. A roll call, please.
If I could have that repeated, who motioned and seconded?
Good question. It was Councilmember Vento that made the motion. I'm not sure we actually did get a second.
Wolf was the
Wolf
second.
seconded.
Oh, Wolf. There we go. Yeah, excellent. Councilmember Wolf.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Fredson?
Aye.
Sterner?
Aye.
Vento?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Zarin?
Aye.
And Lindstrom?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. A few items, just as information items. First two dealing with COVID, starting with an important first one about communication. Ms. McKinley.
Hi, everybody. This is Karen Neese. I'm going to introduce Deb in a second here, but good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you. Karen Neese, I'm Director of Administration and Communications for Environmental Services. But I want to ask you to go back about a year. Let's go back to March of 2020, which seems so long ago. I just read an article that said it's the longest year, and it feels like that. On March 6th, that was the first case of COVID-19 confirmed in Minnesota. On March 13th, Governor Walz declared a peacetime emergency. March 15th, Governor Walz announced a temporary closure of all K-12 public schools from March 18th through the 27th. Then on March 25th, he signed an executive order, 2020, all people residing in Minnesota to shelter in place, beginning March 27th, and the closure of non-essential businesses. Effective April 1st, in addition, the federal government passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which required certain employers to provide employees with paid sick leave, expanded family and medical leave for reasons related to COVID-19. All this was happening, and the CDC was releasing information about mask mandates, social distancing, and other safety recommendations. So the information was changing and evolving by the day. Our incident command was initiated, and we realized that communicating to our employees would be critical to keeping them safe, well-informed, and productive. We were an essential business. So in mid-March of 2020, we mobilized a small communications team who collaborated with other ES personnel, our incident command, and the Met Council to accomplish this objective. Now I'd like to hand it over the presentation to Deb McKinley, who is the Manager of Administration and Communications for Environmental Services. Deb was fortunate to be hired on June 1st, 2020, right in the early days of the pandemic. It turned out to be great timing for us because we needed help, and she came to us with a wealth of communications experience. Yay. So Deb, take it away.
Thanks, Karen, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. So next slide, please. So we want to start with the grounding of the key messages that were critical throughout the pandemic. These were the touchstones. Our pandemic goals were the key messages: preventing the spread of COVID-19 in the workplace. When we talked about things all the time about the ever-evolving safety techniques that were needed, was it disinfection and cleaning, different types of physical barriers, testing and vaccines as they came out. Also was important that we motivated behavior change, whether that's wearing masks, social distancing, or encouraging people to get vaccinated. We also, other messages, reducing the risk of disruption to our essential services. Although the communications itself that we did were not directly about that to everyone, but those were critical behind the scenes activities happening. Supporting employee well-being was another critical message. Employees needed to know that they were a priority and are a priority, not just their physical health with the possibility of contracting COVID or spreading COVID, but their mental health was a big issue as well. People were incredibly stressed about the unknowns. There was a lot of fear, especially early on, and everyone had massive disruptions to their lives. So supporting individual well-being was really important. And so these goals needed to be clear in all of our pandemic communications. The other key message that was also really important was please do not come in to work sick. Always in red, in bold, wherever possible. So where people might have thought that it was okay in the past to come into work with a slight headache or a fever, that definitely was not okay on site anymore. Next slide, please. So yes, within environmental services, we were already communicating prior to the pandemic. We had a monthly staff newsletter, lots of on-site signage, managers shared information with their staff and meetings, emails. The general manager communicated directly via email as well as other messaging, and we had an internal website. But the pandemic and the crisis forced us to explore new approaches and to engage with staff in new ways. We implemented a technology called Assurance NM to really push out the immediate news. So we need to notify employees about whether there was a COVID-like case reported at their work site. This let employees know that we were bringing out a cleaning crew to prevent the spread, potential spread, and also to notify them whether there were close contacts. And a message actually just still came out this afternoon. So those messages are still happening at this phase in the pandemic. The council was also putting out a COVID-19 specific newsletter from Mary Bogey and also had a council internal website dedicated to the pandemic. But we also needed to push out environmental services specific information. So we also produced a pandemic specific email newsletter as well as had our own information resource page. So things that were a little bit in addition to what the council was talking about, we had some specific items like how do we work with shared vehicles? What were the policies there? How were we rolling out COVID screening procedures at each plant and when that was happening? And how to contact our health and safety team. So just as examples of when we needed to get specific, in addition to amplifying council messages. Virtual meetings, like we are participating in now, are all the rage. Prior to the pandemic, the council was implementing Microsoft Teams, and the pandemic rapidly accelerated its adoption in addition to WebEx. And these types of meetings are here to stay. People really appreciate the time that it cuts down on driving time between locations and increases in efficiency. My first interview with environmental services was in person on March 13th. The pandemic threw that all up in array. And my second interview was by virtual meeting. There was this large gap in between as people were scrambling to address needs internally and also get up to speed on how to use the virtual technologies. And I'm actually conducting interviews for one of my vacancies next month using virtual technology for the initial interview. So virtual meetings are definitely here to stay. Town halls became a new way of connecting with staff. So using that virtual meeting technology to talk with large groups across the division. We hosted 16 different town halls since the start of the pandemic. So town halls coming from executive leadership, the incident commander, or Lisa as general manager. We also explored some video messaging to augment those virtual meetings a couple of times. The 100-day Send of the Pandemic pause and thank you from managers to staff, as well as our National Association Clean Water Agency's awards for environmental compliance. we produced a video to celebrate with each of our staff locations during our virtual meeting. So trying to, how do we change the flavor of meetings and spice them up, trying to use some video technology. We also surveyed all of our ES staff about our pandemic response back in November 2020 to better understand their challenges and solicit their ideas, in addition to any type of direct contact with managers or other systems. And we had a 58% response rate, and particularly proud that 50% of our on-site staff participated in that survey. Next slide, please. So this data of different communication strategies that we used, 88 newsletters, 77 text message incident reports, and 16 town halls, it really shows at a glance the story of the pandemic, if you will. So it mirrors the situation. The blue line is the volume of pandemic newsletters. It shows how important it was to communicate at the beginning of the pandemic. It reflects the uncertainty that was happening and the need to get information out to employees. And the orange line actually is the number of incidents communicated to staff via those text messages and emails. And that actually mirrors the curve of the statewide incident rate cases of COVID. So you can kind of see how our communications really mirrors the pandemic situation. And the peak for COVID incidents being reported, COVID illnesses, which is different, COVID illnesses being COVID-like symptoms, not necessarily COVID cases, because we were acting on the information we had to prevent COVID. So if there was a COVID-like illness, that was reported through that system. Next slide, please. So ultimately, we needed to always remember that people are at the heart of our business, and that we needed to focus on taking care of our employees. So we really wanted to celebrate everything they were doing through this really critical time, this crisis that we were having. So just going from right to left in these images, we had recognition articles to highlight the extraordinary efforts, the challenges that were being overcome by employees on-site and teleworkers. We were trying to humanize the pandemic, if you will. We had a who's behind the mask contest. So that upper right is a photo of on-site staff that we asked staff to submit photos of themselves wearing masks. And then we took that collection of photos and once a week in our newsletter had a mask photo. And then we had people submit guesses on who was behind the mask, and they got very nominal prizes for submitting answers. But it was a way to try to keep those connections going between people since we were at such a distance. And also we shared stories, so the lower right, we shared stories about how we were coping as individuals throughout the pandemic. And this photo was one that went along with a story about Matt Selmeyer, the ES budget manager, how his family took precautions for a COVID-safe vacation. Next slide, please. So we learned a lot during this pandemic. Some crucial pieces being employees must feel safe and protected. If they didn't, that would really impede our goals. And one example of how we had to kind of modify our approach to communications, at one point in the pandemic, we were sharing staff's personal stories of folks that they knew who had contracted severe cases of COVID or had even had deaths in their family, like my cousin who had passed away from COVID. And we got some feedback from staff, particularly on-site staff, that was a little too much for them, that it was actually increasing their fears rather than the intention of increasing their use of precautions. So we stopped that approach based on that feedback. And staying connected as people, I just was sharing some examples about that. We needed to be sure that communications addressed all of our employees, no matter the location where they worked, whether it's on-site, telework, or hybrid, or what department and perspective and roles. depending on the information staff were seeing, sometimes if staff saw just council-wide information, some on-site staff felt resentful that there was too much focus on teleworkers. So we really needed to be careful to make sure that we were paying attention to all of our staff types. And so everybody felt that they were that essential worker that we truly are. The information obviously needed to be timely and focused. We were really lucky with the timing of some of our technologies being rolled out that really supported the telework environment, not only for those of us who have to work from home, but for being able to connect to on-site workers and on-site workers being able to connect to their management staff as well. And we also learned that perhaps all this creativity that needed to happen during the pandemic doesn't need to wait for a crisis, and we can implement changes along the way, perhaps at a faster rate. Next slide, please. So I just want to acknowledge the overall team, the communications team, that Karen Neese, who just spoke, as well as Tim O'Donnell and Kate Nyquist, who is no longer with Environmental Services. And with that, I can see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you, Karen. I'll just say a very impressive presentation, and it certainly seems like you left no stone unturned between the 16 town halls. That is amazing. It's like once a month or so. And the videos and the newsletters and the text messages and the virtual meetings and staff survey and more. It's very impressive. Councilmember Vento has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Deb, I'm wondering how long you plan to continue going forth with this. And with that question, I just want to make a note that, you know, as these variants pop up and as new challenges come forward, I think that communication is going to continue to be important, whether folks return to the work site or not. I think that the conversation needs to continue regardless of where we're working and whether or not we're wearing masks, etc. I'd appreciate your comments as to what the plan is.
Thank you, Councilmember. So because as everything you just described, we don't know where this pandemic is taking us and all of the variants. There is a whole incident command structure that is talking about all of the details, about all of the policies, monitoring the environment. And so that feeds into the communications approach and processes. So it's built on that foundation. There is no specific end date for any of this. It really is what is happening out in the community, what do rates look like. The council is very connected to the Department of Health and the planning process there as well. So there is no specific plan for ending any of the communications. There's no case number, you know, the number of cases out there that flips a switch or whatnot. So it's all in cooperation with the guidance from the Department of Health.
Great, thank you very much.
Certainly some of the lessons learned can move forward for future, like what's working with communications, checking in with the staff, doing a staff survey, and learning that they're feeling one way or the other, or how they prefer to be communicated to. These types of lessons, I'm sure you'll take with you into the future. Are there other comments or questions? Hearing none, seeing none. You joined us at just the right time, Deb, a year and a half ago. Really appreciate it. That's an interesting story about how your first interview was in person and then virtual from there on out. And I love the who's behind the mask. That was a very creative way to approach things.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members.
Thank you. All right. And then our next information item is on COVID monitoring. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair Lindstrom and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to provide this update on MCS's activities related to wastewater monitoring of COVID-19. I'm George Sprouse, manager of the Process Engineering, R&D, and Air Quality Group within Operations Support Services Business Unit. Today, my colleague Steve Balog and I will update you on the results of the monitoring activities we introduced to you back at our February update, and we will inform you of new activities that have started since then. Next slide, please. This slide lists our current major activities and highlights some developments since we last spoke with you. A major development since last February is we are now communicating and coordinating regularly with the Minnesota Department of Health. We have discussed our results with them. We are working with them to shape the data we are producing, and we provide weekly data updates to them. Through this interaction, we believe wastewater data is demonstrating both, one, its ability to provide an unbiased gauge of the overall and variant conditions within a wastewater treatment plant service area with only one sample per day, and two, its potential to provide useful public health information during times when testing rates are low. Our main internal work is monitoring metro plant influent wastewater, and in the main part of our presentation, Steve will present those results. In February, we reported how we are measuring the concentration and load of SARS-CoV-2 RNA in metro plant influent. We have continued that work and have now added the monitoring of variants of concern. We are following two different approaches for variant monitoring. One, known as targeted assays, measures the prevalence of variant-specific mutations in the wastewater to determine the prevalence of various variants. This has been successful, and it is the main way we are currently generating variant prevalence data. The other path we are pursuing is still in the research phase. Through it, we may be able to obtain whole genome sequence information on the SARS-CoV-2 RNA in wastewater, and this may provide quicker and more complete wastewater data on newly developing variants. We believe we will have preliminary results on this research method in August. In all of our work, we have developed a great partnership with the University of Minnesota Genomics Center. Recently, the Metropolitan Council communication team produced and posted a YouTube video highlighting this work and our partnership. It provides interviews with Kenny Beckman, the director of the Genomics Center, and with Steve, and it is very well done. The link to the video is indicated on the slides. In addition to our own work, we continue to support state and national projects on wastewater monitoring. We continue to provide samples from all of our plants to the state project being conducted by the University of Minnesota Duluth Medical School. When we last spoke with you, we were participating in phase 1 of the Department of Health and Human Services National Wastewater Surveillance Project with metro plant influence samples. Now we are participating in phase 2 of that project, sending them influence samples from the metro plant, Blue Lake, Seneca, and Empire plant. We include the data from the Health and Human Services Phase 2 project in our weekly update to the Minnesota Department of Health. And now Steve, our principal investigator on this topic, will provide some results from our work. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Chair Lindstrom and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to update you on the results of our monitoring of SARS-CoV-2 viral RNA in metro plant influent. My name is Stephen Balog, and I work as a principal research scientist in the R&D group at the Metro Plant. We have now been collecting and analyzing daily samples for nearly 9 months in collaboration with our partners at the Genomics Center at the university. Next slide, please. The plot shown here is an updated version of the one presented to you back in February. It shows our data for the concentration of SARS-CoV-2 in metro plant influent as the red dashed line, reading on the right axis, and the daily new case data for the metro service area as the gray shaded bars, reading on the left axis. As you can see, the wastewater data closely track the clinical case data. Next slide, please. And this plot illustrates just how well the wastewater data correlate with the clinical case data. Here we plot the weekly average of the daily viral load coming into the metro plant on the y-axis versus the weekly average of daily new cases in the metro plant service area on the x-axis. The very high correlation seen in this plot demonstrates just how accurately the wastewater signal reflects the prevalence of COVID-19 in our community. Next slide, please. Currently, we are experiencing a surge in new clinical cases driven largely by the highly contagious Delta variant. This plot shows recent data for both the metro plant influent load and new clinical cases starting in June and running through July 14. As you can see, the wastewater data confirms clinical observations of an increasing trend in the presence of the virus in the metro plant service area. Next slide, please. As George indicated earlier, a major new development since we spoke with you last is our initiation of variant monitoring in metro plant influence. Our targeted assay work has produced results demonstrating how a surge in the prevalence of the Alpha variant drove the higher viral loads we saw in metro plant influent back in April and May. The blue area in this plot represents the total SARS-CoV-2 load entering the plant over time, and the cream-colored area shows the Alpha variant load. You can see that the Alpha load went from 0 back in January, accounting for up to 85% of the total load during and through the surge from March to June. We didn't have data in time to get it into this presentation, but I can report that the Alpha variant has now been almost wholly supplanted by the Delta variant, which now represents nearly 100% of the SARS-CoV-2 viral RNA we are seeing in metro influence. The pandemic is not over, and we expect other new variants of concern will appear in our community in the future. Going forward, we will be in close communication with Department of Health staff on the selection of which variants to include in our targeted assay variant monitoring program, ensuring we are getting the most relevant data for public health decision making. Next slide, please. Our future efforts will remain focused on monitoring the load of viral RNA and the prevalence of variants of concern in metro plant influent wastewater. We will coordinate closely with Department of Health staff on the variants we target and provide them with weekly updates of our results. Within the next month, we will complete our initial evaluation of the sequence capture technique and hope to begin producing additional sequence-specific information soon thereafter. And we will continue our participation in state and national projects, providing pandemic surveillance and developing the potential of wastewater-based epidemiology for the protection of human health. That completes our update. Thank you again for this opportunity and for your time. If there are any questions, we will be happy to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Sprouse and Mr. Balog. Questions? I'm curious, if someone said, so you provide these reports to the Department of Health, what do they do with that information? How does that inform their decision making? What sort of actionable items come out of the information that you provide them?
Mr. Chair, thank you for that question. And members of the committee, it's a bit of a black box over there, so we don't know exactly what goes on. But our understanding is that our updates are circulated among staff there, and we've had feedback that they are very interested in our variant monitoring program, and are using that to in some sense, confirm what they're seeing on the clinical side of their variant monitoring. So I would say that's what we know at this point.
And I like what you said, that it's an unbiased information, right? The numbers don't lie. So it's really a unbiased gauge of what we're seeing. Other questions, comments? Keep up the good work. This is really fascinating. I'm glad to see that our communications team is producing videos, and I know there's been stories in the media, articles in the media about this, and I think that's a great thing. The more that we can cooperate with our state partners, national partners, academic partners, that'll benefit us all on this and many other things. All right. Thanks again. And that takes us back to Janine, I do believe.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Jason. Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair and committee members. Again, my name is Janine Clancy. I'm the Assistant General Manager of Wastewater Planning and Capital Project Delivery. We're here today to provide an update on the Metro Plant Solids Management Improvement Program because the project is entering a new phase, the public review for air permitting and an environmental assessment worksheet, also known as an EAW. The facility plan, which recommends the addition of a 4th incinerator, followed by renewal of the existing 3 incinerators, was approved in 2018. The 4th incinerator will provide capacity needed to serve growth in the region through the year 2050, and it also gives us the capacity to perform extensive renewal of the existing 3 incinerators. Our project to construct a 4th incinerator at the Metro plant has been delayed by about 1.5 years, and that is because of the air permitting process that Renee will speak about in more detail. However, we've made the necessary adjustments in the capital program, and we're on track to construct the 4th incinerator for 2024 through 2026 using the design build approach. Our presenters today include Renee Heflin, who is our Manager of Plant Engineering, Stephen Norton, the Project Manager, and these folks are from Wastewater Planning and Capital Project Delivery. I also want to recognize Jody Jacoby, our Director of Procurement, and Elaine Ogilvie, Supervisor of the Office of Equal Opportunity, for their parts in the presentation. And then I want to especially thank Auburn Dees from Procurement, Dan Abelson for the Office of General Counsel, Ashanti Payne from the Office of Equal Opportunity, and Phil Waljasper, who continue to provide us really important guidance and support for this very important project. Next slide. The topics for this information item include preliminary design update, air permitting and environmental review, our selected procurement approach, and feedback from our most recent public outreach. Next slide. Now I'm going to ask Stephen Norton to present the preliminary design of the Metro Plant 4th incinerator.
Thanks, Janine. The 4th incinerator will be constructed upon the completion of the current smaller renewal project. MCS plans to construct a 4th parallel incineration train similar to our existing system with comparable energy recovery and air pollution control systems. The energy recovery system reduces our purchased natural gas and electricity by roughly $2 million per year, and the incineration process reduces 850 tons of wastewater solids down to 40 tons of inert ash. An extensive renewal will then be completed on the existing 3 incinerators from 2027 to 2029. In the next 8 years, MCS will spend roughly $200 million on Metro Plant Solids projects. Next slide. The planning for the project was completed when the council approved the facility plan in October of 2018. The project is currently in preliminary design, including permitting and environmental review. The Metro Plant's air permit will be amended and like Janine mentioned, a voluntary EAW will be completed. Both of these processes will be managed by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. As Janine mentioned, the construction of the fourth incinerator will occur from 2024 through 2026, and the delivery will be a fixed price design build. The project has run into some unexpected computer modeling requirements due to where the metro plant is located, which has delayed the air permitting and environmental review for the project. These delays have extended the preliminary design phase by roughly 1.5 years from what was originally planned. Next slide. The fourth incinerator project includes adding a fourth incinerator in a 21,000 square foot addition to the existing building housing the existing 3 incinerators shown on the slide here. The incineration equipment is shown in green, and it'll be housed in the building addition. The stack for the fourth incinerator will be located in the same location and the height as the existing 3 stacks, shown on the right side of the slide in the picture. The project will also include additional dewatering facilities, the fourth incinerator, energy recovery, including a new steam turbine generator, and air pollution control equipment. The project will also include cake receiving facilities so that MCES can accept dewatered solids from other MCES wastewater treatment plants on an emergency backup basis. Next slide. Another important part of preliminary design has been incorporating lessons learned from our over 15 years of operating and maintaining our existing fluid bed incinerators. Our team has held multiple workshops and presentations and developed an internal website for engaging operations and maintenance staff to get their feedback and answer questions. Their feedback is having a direct impact on how the project is being designed and what materials are being specified. One specific example is our existing waste heat boilers, our vertical 3-pass boilers, which have experienced localized areas of erosion causing boiler tube leaks. On the fourth incinerator, we'll be specifying a horizontal boiler with lower velocity, less bends, and better access for replacing tubes. We will also be requiring the design builder to perform computer modeling to improve the flue gas flow through the fourth incinerator train. Corrosion-resistant materials will also be specified to increase service life. Next slide, please. And next, I'll turn it over to Renee to present the air permitting and environmental review.
Thank you, Stephen, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. The following slides are starting here, have been shared at our most recent public outreach. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Environmental Protection Agency are the 2 main government bodies that regulate air emissions and have very strict requirements for air permitting and environmental review. Adding a fourth incinerator will require a major amendment to the metro plant air permit. MCS must submit an application for an air permit amendment. After the PCA reviews this application, they will issue a public notice on the amended air permit and then issue an updated permit for the metro plant. Since the metro plant is located in what's called a SIP maintenance area, and SIP stands for State Implementation Plan, a SIP maintenance area, the project will likely require a SIP review by the EPA. Once the EPA reviews the SIP, they will publish the proposed revision, if any, in the Federal Register and then approve it. The Environmental Assessment Worksheet, or EAW, is not required for this project, but MCS will voluntarily submit one to the MPCA to provide full transparency regarding this project. The purpose of the EAW is to disclose the potential environmental impacts and to identify mitigation measures prior to construction and also prior to permitting. After the EAW is reviewed by the MPCA, they will issue a public notice. The PCA will decide if additional work is needed or if an environmental impact statement, an EIS, required significant additional work and review is required. If not, the PCA will issue what is called a negative declaration supporting why an EIS is not required, and finally, a findings of facts. Together, air permitting and environmental review will require up to 3.5 years to complete, and we will be ready to award the design build contract for the 4th incinerator project in 2024. Next. Neighborhoods surrounding the metro plant include environmental justice areas as identified by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. The map here is from the MPCA's website. 40% or more of the residents in the blue areas report income less than 185% of the federal poverty level. 50% or more of residents in the green areas are people of color. Using the MPCA's framework to evaluate environmental impacts of the 4th incinerator project, we found that the project will have no significant detrimental impacts to surrounding communities. Our evaluations, which are included in the application to modify the air permit for a new incinerator, and the project environmental assessment worksheet, will be independently reviewed by the PCA, and the public will be provided the opportunity to review and comment on the air permit amendment and the EAW. The public review process is managed by the PCA, and we anticipate that the PCA will send out mailers and issue public notice towards the end of the year or early next year. Next. As part of the air permit amendment, before the 4th incinerator is constructed, MCS must demonstrate through computer modeling that after construction of the project, the metro plant will continue to meet national plant property boundary. National ambient air quality standards have been established by the Environmental Protection Agency for 6 criteria pollutants for the protection of public health and the environment. Our preliminary modeling results indicate that the metro plant will continue to meet national ambient air quality standards and that the project will have no significant impact on air quality for surrounding communities. These modeling results will be updated in the near future because the PCA has updated the requirements for modeling. PM2.5 is small airborne particulate matter or material with a diameter less than 2.5 microns. PM10 is particulate matter with a diameter less than or equal to 10 microns. On the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the pollutant PM10. Next. The graphic on the left side of the slides shows a gradation of micron particle sizes from the smallest, a smoke particle at 1/2 micron, to the largest, a coffee ground at 100 microns. A PM10 particle is about the size of a piece or a particle of pollen. Breathing in large concentrations of PM10 can damage your lungs, and that's why there's an air quality standard in place for PM10. In 1994, the blue area shown in the map on the right, surrounding the metro plant and other industries, this area was above the national ambient air quality standards for PM10. The area includes Childs Road and Red Rock Road. When an area exceeds a national ambient air quality standard for a particular pollutant, the PCA identifies the area as non-attainment for that particular pollutant. In response to non-attainment for PM10, the MPCA developed a state implementation plan, or SIP, which is a collection of regulations and requirements for the area to bring it back below the national ambient air quality standard. Emissions reductions successfully brought this area back into attainment in 2002, and MCS played a role in improving the air quality in the area by replacing multiple hearth incinerators at the Metro plant with fluid bed incinerators in 2005. However, once an area is identified as non-attainment for a particular pollutant, even when the conditions improve and the air quality standard is met, the area is designated as a maintenance area by the PCA for that pollutant. When there is a proposed project in a maintenance area, the EPA or the MPCA may choose to review its state implementation plan depending on the project and make additional monitoring and/or modeling requirements to ensure the area remains in compliance. For example, we had to update our model based on input from 13 other industries, and this delayed our work on the air permit, on our air permit amendment. For the fourth incinerator project will actually reduce the plant's potential to emit PM10 by almost 2.5 tons per year from what was previously permitted. That's because we didn't construct previously planned facilities for land application of sludge, and we were able to accept a low PM10 limit due to the excellent performance of air pollution control equipment in removing particulates from incinerator emissions. Next. The existing Metro Plan incinerators have an exceptional track record of environmental compliance, and we're very proud of their performance. The incinerators have performed so well that the emissions data from the Metro plant were used by the EPA in establishing new, more stringent standards for incinerators in 2010. In 2010, the EPA set new emission standards for existing sewage sludge incinerators constructed before 2010, and even lower standards for new sludge incinerators constructed after 2010. These standards are based on treatment technology, and they're separate from the national ambient air quality standards I just presented. The existing incinerators at the Metro plant were constructed in 2005, so the standards for existing incinerators apply. The graph here compares actual emissions data for the Metro plant incinerators, the dark blue columns, to the standards for new sewage sludge incinerators. The not existing incinerators, but the new ones. And the pollutants of concern are listed along the x-axis. Total suspended particulates, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, etc. The standard or limit for each pollutant is represented as 100%, the dark blue dashes at the top of the chart. And you'll see that for each, you see in this graph that for each pollutant, the Metro plant incinerator emission is just a fraction of the standard for new incinerators. And these are the results that give us confidence that the fourth incinerator will be capable of meeting the lower technology-based standards established for new sewage sludge incinerators. Next. This map is an example evaluation we completed for the Environmental Assessment Worksheet, or EAW. A large part of the EAW is emissions risk analysis. An air emissions risk analysis quantifies potential human health risks due to emissions from a proposed project. There are 8 different types of situations or scenarios that must be evaluated. This example is the resident cancer scenario. The resident cancer scenario assumes a lifetime of ventilation 30 years of ingesting homegrown produce and indirectly ingesting soil. And the analyses are carried out at the facility boundary and beyond. We completed computer modeling for total metro plant emissions, not just the fourth incinerator. The green highlight indicates areas that pass and are 10% or more of the risk threshold. 10% is the outer boundary, and risk increases towards the plant fence line. The white line white lines represent risk in 10% increments from the outer green boundary towards the plant at the center. Yellow highlighted area would indicate exceedance of the risk threshold, and yellow would indicate the need for additional mitigation measures. So you can see here that for the resident cancer risk scenario, the metro plant meets the risk threshold with the addition of the fourth incinerator. And also, I want you to note that there are no residents or residential farming located within the green area. Computer modeling for the other 7 scenarios show that the metro plant meets the risk threshold for all 8 scenarios required in the environmental assessment worksheet. Next. Greenhouse gas emissions from the fourth incinerator are partially offset by the energy recovery equipment that Stephen presented earlier. However, the real point is that wastewater treatment as a whole contributes very little greenhouse gas emissions in the overall scheme of things. This graph, developed by the PCA, depicts greenhouse gas emissions by category. They are estimates by the PCA. The various categories, commercial, residential, industrial, etc., are different colors in the column chart, in the stacked column. The left column is the estimated 2010 total greenhouse gas emissions for the state, the whole state of Minnesota, and the right column is the estimated 2010 total greenhouse gas emissions for the Twin Cities metro area. You'll see the small yellow segment that represents landfills and wastewater treatment plants, and the yellow segment accounts for less than 1/4% of the total. Next. Incineration technology at the metro plant has been a key factor in reducing odors from the metro plant. Before the fluid bed incinerators were installed in 2005, we received about 70 odor complaints each year. And after the fluid bed incinerators were constructed with other odor control improvements around the plant, the number of odor complaints reduced to 0. Adding a fourth incinerator will not create any additional odors and will help us continue to be a good neighbor, actually, to surrounding communities. Next. So the metro plant is located next to the Mississippi River and Pig's Eye Lake. And the plant has played a key role in improving water quality in the Mississippi River since construction in 1938. It has 8 consecutive years of perfect permit compliance, discharge permit compliance. And although this project does not directly impact liquids treatment, the addition of solids processing capacity at the plant will help minimize the risk of not being able to remove solids from the wastewater. There are no proposed changes to the liquids or the stormwater discharge as part of the project, and nearby water resources will not be impacted by construction or the operation of the fourth incinerator, and not in the short term or in the long term. Next. At this time, I'll turn it over to Jody Jacoby to present the selected design build procurement approach.
Thank you, Renee. Good afternoon, Chair Lindstrom and committee members. My name is Jody Jacoby, and I'm the Director of the Procurement Department. And I'm really excited to be here this afternoon to talk to you today about the procurement approach and some of the considerations for this really important project. And as this is an important project, there's been a small group of stakeholders in procurement, in the Office of Equal Opportunity, and in the Environmental Services Engineering Unit, and then also the Office of General Counsel to work closely together to, again, address some of the unique challenges with the design build procurement. In working with the owner's agent, we learned that there's a limited number of incinerator vendors that do this specialized work. Really, there's only 2 or 3 that we believe may be qualified for these large wastewater solids incinerator projects like this. And additionally, of course, we're not sure of their interest or their availability. The incinerator vendor will design and furnish the incinerator and the air pollution control train, and additionally be responsible for up to 30% of the design build contract. Setting the structure to not have the incinerator vendor choose the design builder. Rather, the council wants to retain independent selection for the best design build team. So together, the group identified 4 objectives. The first one is to preserve single source responsibility for performance of the 4th incinerator with the design builder. Second, to provide the best value selection for the council of both the incinerator vendor and the design builder. Third, very important to maintain a competitive process. And then finally, also equally important to encourage MCUB participation. The decision on the procurement approach included 3 really focus areas for due diligence. First, reviewing samples of similar procurement documents from other agencies. And in doing so, we met with a few public agencies in utilities that utilized a similar process approach, including Kansas City Water. They had a project called the Blue River Biosolids. Also, Fulton County, Georgia, the projects called Johns Creek and Big Creek wastewater treatment projects, with some really valuable and specific feedback that we learned. First, that it was different equipment, but the same process. Second, their Johns Creek project went so well that they're using the same process for Big Creek. And then finally, the council, because of these research done and some of the feedback, we intend to closely mirror the process in Georgia. And this, finally, this approach helped us not only have some lessons learned,
Jody,
but
I'm
to
sorry, this is Susan.
build consensus. And so there's
Jody?
been a, yes?
Jody, I'm sorry, this is Susan. If you could please turn your video off, you're breaking up in your audio.
Yes. Hi, Susan.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
I continue a certain areas up if it makes sense for me to loop back.
That is so much better. Yes, if you could start that statement over, that would be great.
All right. So forgive me for my Wi-Fi here, but just loop back a little bit and looking at, because it's really important to talk about why the procurement approach was chosen. And we used 3 focus areas for our due diligence. The first one was reviewing samples of similar procurement documents from other agencies. Second, we met with a few public agencies and utilities that utilized a similar process, including Kansas City Water, and most importantly, two projects in Georgia at Fulton County, Johns Creek and Big Creek wastewater treatment projects, with some specific feedback and lessons learned, including there was different equipment, but the same process. And the Johns Creek went so well that they're using the same process for Big Creek, their other project. And as such, the council intends to closely mirror the process in Fulton County. So finally, this approach really helped build consensus. And there's been various meetings with stakeholders, including environmental services, Black & Veatch, who's the owner's agent, procurement, Office of General Counsel, risk, and the Office of Equal Opportunity. The selected three-step procurement approach is different than previous design-build contracts. And we added the first step to pre-select the incinerator vendor. And in this step, the council will execute a professional services contract with the incinerator vendor. The contract will support all pre-qualified design build teams during the design build proposal phase. And the design build pre-qualification and request for proposals, steps 2 and 3, are really similar to previous council design build projects. The three potential incinerator vendors are Suez, headquartered in France, Hitachi Zosen, located in Switzerland, and Henken, based in New Jersey. The next slide. Oops, I'm sorry, I went through the slide. We talk about some of the risks that we looked at and also some of the mitigation strategies. Some of the risks is, of course, receiving one design build proposal. And we've already walked through some of the potential mitigation strategies, which would be pre-selecting an incinerator vendor, and will level the playing field for all pre-qualified design builders. Another risk is the incinerator vendor does not work equitably with all design builders, and the mitigation strategies considered are requiring incinerator vendors to work with all design builders. Additionally, compensating the incinerator vendor to work with the design builders and verifying that they are working with them. We also considered risks of liability and having more information to complete these proposals. And so we're pretty confident based on some of the information and some of the collaboration and the focus groups and experience working with our other public sector partners that we have a really great approach. And for the next portion of the presentation, next slide, please. I'll transition to Elaine of Ogilvy in the Office of Equal Opportunity to talk more about the strategies that we're employing and encouraging for underutilized participation.
Elaine, this is Susan. You may be on mute. Jody, this is Susan. It appears that Elaine may not be in the feed anymore.
Okay, I've got Elaine's notes, so if she comes back on, she can take over. Otherwise, I'm okay with presenting them.
Okay, we appreciate that. I also do not see Ashante Payne at this time either. So if you're willing to continue forward, that would be great.
All right, multitasking, right? All right, I'll stop my video. Next slide, please.
Fantastic.
Oops, go back one slide. I apologize. Thank you. So this is a large project, and I know the Office of Equal Opportunity is really thinking about what OEO engagement strategies can take place early on, setting not only the project, but also the council up for success. And for the fourth incinerator vendor RFP, they'll be encouraging support and the incinerator vendor to seek MCUB opportunities early. For the design build RFQ, they'll be requiring the design builders to submit experience that they have in meeting with local certified small business participation goals. And they'll be also requiring the design builders to include a small business and workforce inclusion plan. And for the design build RFP, OEO will be requiring the design builders to submit an MCUB utilization plan. They will hold meet and greet sessions for proposers and MCUB businesses to ensure they can connect. And the goal will be to support design builders if they have any questions completing their plan and finding MCUB businesses. And I know OEO has done this successfully on many really large scale projects for the council. And so for the next slide, please, I'll turn it back over to Janine to talk about public engagement.
Thank you, Jody. Thanks for pinch hitting as well. We really appreciate it. Next slide, please. So significant outreach activities were performed in 2018 to local government entities, MCS customers, industrial waste customers, regulatory agencies, businesses located around the Metro plant, neighborhood districts, community organizations, as well as environmental advocacy organizations. In addition, we mailed over 4,000 mailings that were sent out to residents surrounding the plant to let them know about the project. We held an open house event and a formal public hearing to receive public comments on the project. And during the public hearing, a nearby resident commented that they appreciated the work MCES has done, and the difference between the Metro plant today is night and day from what it used to be in terms of odor. During public outreach held in 2018, there were no concerns expressed in regard to odor, noise, or traffic. Next slide. In preparation of the future MPCA public notices for the air permit amendment and the EAW, MCES hosted 2 virtual project update events on June 15th and June 16th. The purpose of the 2 events was to provide a project update focused on air permitting and environmental review. Over 19,000 mailers were sent to addresses in a 2.5-mile radius surrounding the plant. There were 5 attendees for the 2 events, including 3 residents, 1 MPCA staff, and 1 potential contractor. All comments and questions received were from 1 resident, nearby resident of St. Paul, and these comments and our responses are given in the next 2 slides. Next. The first comment concerns odors and is very positive. I want to just note that the individual said odors were a serious problem for the Metro plant in my neighborhood, Mounds Park, when I first moved into the area. I attended a meeting about the initial 3 burners and approved of that plan. The subsequent odor reductions after those incinerators went online was exceptional. It was a significant improvement to quality of life in my community. The remaining questions on this slide concerned odors, ash disposal, and risk analysis. Next slide. And these are the last questions from a St. Paul resident, and I'll just read the last one. I grew up on the Mississippi River in North Minneapolis, where the river was more or less an open sewer. Because of the sewer separation and substantial improvements in wastewater treatment, The river is now cleaner than it has been during my lifetime. Wastewater treatment is one of the reasons why, but it is invisible to most of us. It isn't to me. Thanks for protecting air and water quality, and special kudos for doing it during the pandemic. In general, these comments and questions were thoughtful and much appreciated by the project team. I also want to note that these comments would never have been received without the exceptional commitment from our operations and maintenance staff who operate and maintain the solids management facility every day of the year, 24 hours a day. Next. So in summary, you can go to the next slide, Jason. In summary, increases solids processing capacity by adding a fourth incinerator at the Metro plant is an important public works project for our region. We rely on wastewater treatment infrastructure to protect public health and the environment. Our current incinerators at the Metro plant will be 20 years old by the time this project is completed and is in need of renewal. The extent of the renewal combined with population growth require our organization to expand incineration capacity at the Metro plant. The work that MCS has done in the past 20 years at the Metro plant has contributed to improved air quality in the air surrounding the Metro plant. Based on the performance of our existing incinerators, we are confident that we can achieve the emission standards for new fluidized bed incinerators. We are also confident that we will continue to achieve the energy recovery goals that we have set for our organization. So in closing, the fourth incinerator is the most cost-effective and sustainable alternative to meet the region's wastewater needs. It will have the lowest community impact and will improve the reliability of the wastewater treatment system. And with that, Mr. Chair, the group is ready to answer any questions.
Fantastic, thank you. I've been part of the public engagement process, and so I've heard a similar type of presentation at least a couple of times, and I'm impressed every single time, especially when I see that slide that shows there was about 70 complaints a year before 2005 or so, and that's gone down to essentially zero. So that's impressive. Comments or questions from the committee? I saw Councilmember Wolf first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding of all of this, we're going to make things cleaner if we build this. And by delaying it by a year and a half for more study, they're actually going to increase pollution because we have to wait to make things cleaner. Is that a correct reading of the information?
Mr. Chair and council members, Councilmember Wolf and Renee can add to this. As you well know, because of the permitting process, it is very rigorous for incinerator facilities. And yes, we did need to work with the PCA on getting additional data, but I think at the end, we will be able to move this process through as quickly as possible. And perhaps that year and a half delay in the long run, when we're talking about the facilities that last in this length of time, probably has been well spent in terms of developing the material. So I understand the frustration. The project team is frustrated as well, but I think it was time well spent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sterner.
Thank you, Chair. And my question, this goes in like, we're already showing like what's going forward. We need the fourth burner, and I got all that, the presentation, but I'm wondering, there's like 10 ways that you can take care of waste, and we even have like St. Cloud that does fertilizer. I know we do a couple other things in some of our other plants. So how was it, what was the process of settling on the fourth burner rather than composting or biogas or making hydrogen or fertilizer with the plant, or trying some other options besides burning? Especially it seems like with renewable energy and other parts, we're trying to go to wind and things, and Sherco 3 is going to be shut down with coal, and now we're burning waste on this end. And I get the fuel reclaiming and all that, but if you could maybe just someone could talk about that, the big vision picture to get to this point, I'd like to hear about that.
Mr. Chair and council members, I'll start. And again, this is Janine Clancy, and Renee Heflin can add as well. But there was a solids management facility plan put together many years ago, and during that helped us look at our solids processing throughout the MCS system. But then the facility plan that was developed for the Metro plant did look at other alternatives, and it determined that incineration was the most cost-effective in process for this application. Now, as you know, we serve 75% of the region at the Metro plant in terms of solids capacity. And so there is a lot of the capacity that is needed to treat our wastewater solids is significant. And I would also note that the energy recovery is something that's really important to us as well and is achieved through this project. And I would just like to ask Renee if she would like to comment further.
Thank you, Janine. I would like to add a couple of comments, Mr. Chair, if I can, and Councilmember Sterner.
Please go ahead.
So I would just like to add that it is an alternatives analysis. You can only really do two things with wastewater solids, and you dry them and prepare them for incineration, or you digest and you can prepare for land application, or like Blue Lake, you can do drying. So when we do these evaluations, alternatives evaluations, you find that they're very site specific. So I would just like to add that for the Metro plant, when we looked at it, we have some site constraints. It would take a farm of 30 digesters to be able to digest Metro plant solids. We also looked at digesting just a portion of the solids. But it comes down to this, that the Metro plant, not only where it's located in the city of St. Paul, we would have to drive 100 miles one way to get to land application. So it's very much site specific and where it's located in a city, an industrial area. And I would say our culture at the Metro plant has evolved around incinerating solids. That would be secondary. The primary thing is where it's located. And also you find that there's a point where you treat more and more solids, your analysis switches to where incineration, the incinerators are larger units, and you have to be able to utilize most of that equipment. Our incinerator is 115 tons per day, of 105 to 115, depending on where we're running. Tons per day of solids. So you have to be processing so many solids. You're in an area in the city where you're having to drive so far that the land application alternatives become not as cost competitive with incineration. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm complete, and thanks for the great answers.
Did I hear correctly that every day, Renee, there's about 115 tons of solids?
Mr. Chair, so at the Metro plant every day, that they process on average 240 dry tons per day of solids. And the real trick with that, incineration first, the dewatering and then incineration drops off water. So you see a lot of numbers. you see somewhere around 140 tons of wet solids. And we have to first remove all of that water, and then we go after the solids, destroying the volatile solids. So we really go down from 840 wet tons to 40 tons of a dry inert ash. So thank you
That
for
was
the
my
for the
recollection, that
question.
it was way in the in the 800 number at the start of the process, down to 40 at the end of the day.
Right, and that's with the water. Thank you. Yeah, because we fly around the numbers, and they do make sense, and it's just getting on a consistent units. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And good question, Councilmember Sterner. Others? Well, the process continues. Thank you very much for that informative update. Excuse me. And that takes us to our final item. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my granddaughter just arrived, so I might get a 3-year-old interruption here. But I did want to mention that I think our capstone for our information items today is really important to add that capstone to. Our staff, as you can see, are innovating and they're adapting to make a positive difference for our region. No, ES has been and will continue to adapt and innovate in response to the changing situations with COVID-19. And I think with this project that you've just heard about and the incineration technology that we're using, it's raised the bar for solids handling nationally. And locally, it's vastly improved air quality for our neighbors to the plant as well as the region. And we couldn't do this without the dedicated, talented staff we have in ES, but also this innovative approach to project delivery is our partners in the Met Council, especially procurement and OEO, are really critical. So can't say enough good about the staff who keep bringing us high performance and really good results. So my hat's off to staff, and I appreciate the support that you're giving us in the efforts that we have to bring to you, and your input and feedback is always really helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a long meeting today. Super informative updates and projects as always. So keep on keeping on. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it, and have a great evening. Meeting adjourned.